Good afternoon. Good afternoon all. I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is open to the press and public. The meeting is being broadcast live, and a recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings, but I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can I ask members to refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. May I remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending a meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting. And please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. And please do not interrupt discussions until you have notified of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Okay, thanks. So we will now move on to the agenda. Agenda item 1. Obviously welcome and apologies. So Niall, do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair. Afternoon. We have apologies from Councillor David Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Can I also mention Councillor Peter Jones's apologies as exec member. Unfortunately, he couldn't make today's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 2. Declarations of interest. Members, do you have any declarations with regards to the item we are scrutinising today? Around from that, no. So that we can now move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes from 24th of the 10th, 24. And members are reminded that these are the minutes of the meeting, the previous meeting, where the committee scrutinised employability services. Could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as agreed. Okay, thank you, members. Agenda item 4, which is the action sheet. So if I could ask Rebecca to run through that, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, firstly, apologies, members. There are a few actions there that are still outstanding, and they have been chased, and officers are dealing with them. So, as soon as I have that information, I'll get it over to you. You can see from the list there that the information on meets has been provided, and also I have, since this has been published, sent out the recommendation responses from the last meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Right, agenda item 5, which is the digital services and customer care performance. Before we commence discussions, I would like to welcome James Vale, Head of Customer Digital and ICT Services, Linda King, Customer Services Manager, and George Bentley, Digital Data and Technology Delivery Manager. If you don't mind, I'll now hand you over to James to give a very brief introduction to the report before we commence questioning. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. As you say, very brief introduction. I know you've all read it. The report seeks to provide information and insight between the availability and effectiveness of our digital services and the impact that can have on customer care demand and performance. It also reflects the cause and effect nature of actions and issues elsewhere in the council system. So, for example, when we send out high volumes of reminders, summons from a council tax perspective, that often leads to increased demand and impacts on customer care performance. We know there's more to do to improve our digital services, and we have a plan to deliver on that. But, for example, we know we need to focus on an improved flow of information. So once residents submitted a request, improving that insight in terms of what's happening to that request, the status of it, so that they don't feel the need to either contact customer care for an update, or often residents will also contact members to chase that update on their behalf. We also know, and it's reflected in the report, that the appetite is there for digital services. So you can see from some of the data in the report, members, that the spike in terms of usage of our digital services during the COVID period. and to an extent that's been sustained and maintained post-COVID. So we know the appetite is there, but now it's really about building on that and improving our digital services. And the impact of that, or what we're trying to achieve in terms of that correlation and that link with customer care, is to make sure that our officers are able to support those people that really need that support over the phone, face-to-face, either that's due to vulnerability or complexity of the cases that they're raising with us. And we know that if we can encourage more people that are able to do things online, then that will free up our resource and our team to be able to really help those people more effectively and more easily. So yeah, well, welcome scrutiny meeting this evening, and yeah, look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, Chair. Okay,
thank you very much. Okay, quite a few to get through, so if we move on to the members' questions, starting with myself, which is relevant to paragraph 3.2, which is the strategy is a key enabler to many of the wellbeing objectives set out in our county plan. What cross-council collaboration takes place to ensure the digital strategy is embedded within all our service areas? And is our organisational culture and leadership prioritising the delivery and monitoring of digital services to enable our wellbeing objectives?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of points to raise on that. So we do have a digital data and technology steering group, which has representation from all of the directorates across the council, that kind of group manager, head of service level. And the purpose of that group is to sort of review plans around digital, so what are we trying to achieve, unblock things. So when we've got pieces of work, projects that we're delivering on, they don't always run smoothly, sometimes there's issues, so we've got those service reps to link in and better embed what we're trying to do with those service areas to unblock things and ensure delivery. So that group is working really well and does, broaden the kind of reach of digital across the council and ensure that collaboration is happening. In terms of the culture and leadership, yes, I would say there is a focus on digital, an understanding of its capability in terms of how it can help us achieve our objectives set out in the county plan and in relation to our Marmot principles. Over the last few months, I've been round to all the directorate management team meetings to talk about digital, how it can help, the expectations on service areas, understand any barriers that they may have. We've recently launched a programme called Digital Flooding, to effect that cultural change that is needed to really embed the use of digital data and technology within our sort of ways of working. And that entails three core pillars, if you like. So one is around raising awareness, so making sure that officers across the council are aware of all the digital solutions that we've got available to us and how they can help them and how they're being used by other teams and individuals across the council. We've got a pillar around skills, capability and capacity, so how can we support officers across the council to be able to make use of some of these digital solutions without then always having to rely on my sort of central small team to do it all for them type thing. And then the third element is in relation to our governance. So have we got the policies, the procedures, the guidance, the acceptable use, which enables us to make best use of our digital solutions. So that's a programme that's being rolled out at the moment. We've also recently engaged with the Rebel Torvine Group to get that wider view of digital from across the organisation. That's proved really valuable in validating some of the ambitions around digital flooding. And we've also this week undertaken presentations at the Future Torvine sessions, linking in with kind of master planning, county plan, Marmot aspirations. How can digital, enable and empower some of these objectives to be met.
Okay, thank you, James. Question 2, I'd ask Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding paragraph 3.2 of the report again, which states that by supporting and encouraging customers to self-serve digitally through the Council's website and/or app, customer care resources can be more focused on supporting digitally excluded customers or those with more complex needs. and the phone or in-person via appointment provision, which is pretty much what you outlined, James. So the question is, how well do we know and understand our communities to be able to assess the number of digitally excluded customers? How do we identify gaps in the provision for them? And how do we reach those that are hard to reach? And adding on to that, how do we assess how successfully we are achieving this goal?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah, so I mean, we've taken a broad decision in terms of the contacts that we prioritise in customer care. So broadly speaking, it's adult services contacts, it's contacts around revenues and benefits, and then what we try to do then is encourage perhaps the more straightforward type inquiries that come in, typically in relation to sort of the economy and environment area. We focus our resources more on those other services I've referred to, and try and sort of nudge, I suppose is the theory, customers to be able to do things online where they're able to do so. But I think it's an important distinction that we are digital first and not digital only. So those channels remain open. What it potentially means is that someone ring in to speak to us about adult services or their benefits, they might be able to get through a little bit more quickly to our advisors than someone who's ringing maybe to report a missed bin collection. Now that's quite a broad interpretation of need and vulnerability, and over time, as we develop our kind of data insights and those sorts of things, perhaps we can be a little bit more specific and a little bit more targeted, but that's the kind of broad principle that we adopt at the moment. In terms of our understanding of our communities and digital exclusion, there are some national data sets. So there's something called the Digital Exclusion Risk Index, which has been developed by the Greater Manchester Authority, which draws upon things like access to connectivity devices. It draws in demographic data to give us a view of potential digital exclusion in a ward-based level across Torfaen. So there's some national data sets there that we can draw upon. We are doing some work around digital inclusion, so it's referenced in the report around the work that goes on in ACL, in our libraries. Some of our partner organisations are also undertaking. But I think it's fair to say, Councillor Clarkson, that we can work in a more coordinated way moving forwards to try and develop that deeper understanding of community need around digital inclusion and make sure that the provision that we're providing is in the right place at the right sort of level. So that's certainly something that we'll be looking to achieve with partners moving forwards. And then in terms of how we're going to measure success, well, again, we've got some broad measures around, online take-up, so those sorts of things are really good indicators for us to be able to measure, broadly, are more people able to do things online. And also we'd hope to see changes to that DERI, they call it, the Digital Exclusion Risk Index, at a kind of ward level. So we've got a couple of data sets which we can use to monitor performance and progress in that sort of area. But again, I think in line with the community's approach, there's much more we can and should be doing, resource allowing, at community council level, town council level, to sort of drill down at that more local level and understand local need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the answers.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Nick Horler, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just putting a supplementary on this one. On 3.1, how are the ambitions, the three ambitions that you monitored, and how are they being achieved? That was a question I wanted to ask last time.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hawley. Yes, so through our Customer Digital and IT Service Plan, we've got a range of measures in relation to the ambitions that are set out there. There's more information I can provide to members off the back of that if of interest, but it would be things like, and some of it's included in the report, so things like percentage online transactions, customer satisfaction, customer effort, from in terms of innovative and effective use of systems and technology. We've got targets and measures around system availability and those sorts of things. So we've got a suite of measures effectively which are recorded in our annual service plan, and like I say, happy to share information with members after the meeting.
Okay, thank you both. Move on to question 3. I'd like to ask Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is going to 3.2 again, in reference to the same section as the previous question. Do we record any data on the in-person service provision to be able to plot more detailed analysis of who needs it and who uses the service.
Thank you, Councillor Evan. Yeah, I perhaps bring Linda in on this one, but just before you come in, Linda, we do capture data in terms of the appointments that are booked and the appointment types. So we have got a feeling for that. But obviously, Linda, as well, we get walk-ins and things like that, which we have to deal with. So perhaps you could pick this one up in terms of that data and insight that we capture, please.
Thanks, James. Councillor Evans, just to support what James has said, the majority of the data we collect at the moment is in relation to individuals that book appointments. With regards to drop-ins, we don't specifically capture that other than a service request. So if somebody came in to request a service, we would report that on behalf of the individual, but there may be an opportunity to be able to better capture that data. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to encourage the use of iPads within each of the customer care centres. So what we're trying to achieve is that if an officer reports something, either with the customer and shows them how to do that, or we report it on their behalf, we'll now be able to track that information. So we should get a better understanding and insight of the type of numbers that are coming in, not just that, but also their needs and requirements.
Great, thank you for that.
Sorry,
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Linda. And just to add to that, again, as referenced in the report, members, around surveys around customer satisfaction, customer effort. So if someone comes in for an in-person appointment with us, they are invited off the back of that, if it generates a service request, to provide feedback on their satisfaction, on the effort. And the reason we try and capture effort is to understand, well, perhaps they're not digitally excluded, but they've chosen to come in and speak to us face to face. Why is that? Is there something we could, is there insight that we can then use to improve our digital services so that next time they could do that online? Obviously appreciating that some people, rather and sometimes need to, because of digital exclusion, come in and speak to us face to face.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Move on to a couple of questions on the digital services now, which brings us to question 4. I'd like to call back in, please, Councillor Steve Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is in regarding the section in 4.11. There are currently approximately 300 digital forms available via My Council services via our website and app for the submission of service requests. Has a review been conducted to see whether all 300 forms are necessary? Is there any scope for merging or combining some together, because there seems a hell of a lot of forms to deal with?
Thank you, Councillor Evan. Yeah, it is a lot of forms. I mean, we do keep track of usage, and obviously some of those forms are far more used than others. I think it's a good point and a fair point around reviewing them. I'm sure we do, and we have in the past, but and I can see Linda nodding, so we have done that in the past. I'm not sure, Linda, how recently we've done that, but it is something that we can monitor and track quite easily, isn't it, in terms of usage and review from there on in.
Yeah, there's actually, and George may wish to come in here because George directly manages the digital team, but I know that the team are constantly reviewing the suites. They're trying to, where possible, do as you've requested, Councillor Evans, to merge forms, to try and make the customer experience simplified. So, so it's easy to find what someone needs. So there is a massive review that's taking place of those at the moment.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
Thank you. We'll go question 5. Councillor Nicola, please.
This is relating to 4.13. Over the past 6 years, there's been an increase, both numbers of services requested being raised by customers using the website and MCS app. Do we also capture and monitor complaints or requests submitted via social media channels?
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I think, as Linda's touched upon already, the majority of our performance data, links to those specific contacts that we have, either via appointments, telephony, We do obviously monitor social media, and we do provide responses and manage customer inquiries via social media. It's not something that we report on formally through service planning at the moment, but we are currently exploring the use of a system that might better enable us to do that. So at the moment, our management of social media is natively through Facebook, through X and what have you, making it quite difficult to pull out sort of reporting data on what's specifically around customer care and enable us to report from there. But the system we're exploring at the moment would better enable us to be able to do that and provide some insight in terms of social media demand and performance.
Yeah, thank you. I'm also aware that there are certain colleagues within Torvine that will monitor what's going on currently around it, especially around rubbish and things like that. For example, this week I made contact with the base team and they already knew about it because one of the colleagues had actually seen the post within social media, dealt with it, and I was second-hand used to it. So there are people within Torvine that do scan on particular days on the areas that they live in, so it's a reputation.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I think that's a really positive reflection on the proactive nature of what we do in customer care and across the council. Absolutely, we've got staff who are responsible for reviewing social media and, like I say, responding to posts and creating service requests off the back of them. To be proactive be as proactive as possible. So that's really helpful feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Would you like to put forward any recommendations at this point on the digital service provision, please? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to customer care performance. Question 6, calling Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at 4.25 of the report on the abandoned call rate, and the report seems to indicate that abandoned call rates is rising. The question is, it's difficult, but how do we find out the reasons why? Do we gather any data at the moment to try and identify why abandoned call rates are so rising, and how can we improve on that?
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. I think there are a number of answers to that. I think the first thing to note is we're not comparing like-for-like data necessarily, so apologies if that's slightly misleading in the report, but we've got the full-year figure for 23-24 and the sort of half-year figure for the current financial year. And obviously, we have peaks and troughs within that. So at the beginning of the year is often our peak time as we get all the council tax bills go out, demand will rise at that point. And then what you tend to see is performance will improve throughout the year, building up towards the end of that sort of March period again, where again we might see a spike in demand. So we're not, when you compare like for like, quarter by quarter, we're not a million miles away from where we were this time last year. And we're confident that, generally we're heading in the right direction, particularly when you compare that to previous years, where we've had abandon rates at a much higher level, wait times in a much higher level. And I think that's really testament to the work that Linda and the team do and the customer care officers do in terms of dealing with the demand that comes in as effectively as possible. As I said earlier, it can be impacted by all manner of things. If something goes wrong, a waste vehicle breaks down, for example, that's out of our control largely from a customer care point of view, but that will lead to increases in demand. So there are always those kind of anomalies throughout the year. But also what we're doing at the moment is being much more proactive in terms of our promotion of digital services on a more seasonal-based approach. So Linda and the team do a lot of work to understand demand, what's driving that demand, and looking at how we can better communicate to our residents. So if we know there's a peak period coming in terms of, I don't know, potholes, for example, can we really push the availability of that digital offering so that residents are aware of it and can make a choice to use the online service as opposed to ringing us up. So whilst some of that demand is not within our sort of control, what is within our control, Linda and the team are very proactive in terms of trying to manage that demand as effectively as possible and put in place mitigation. And I think the general picture, like I say, over the last few years is that's working in terms of that performance trend. Obviously, we'll be able to revisit this at the end of the year and have a like-for-like comparison to 23-24, and we'll know more at that stage. But like I say, Linda and I think, Linda, I'm putting words in your mouth here, you chip in if you want to, but we're reasonably comfortable in terms of where we're at in terms of where we're at in terms of the year, aren't we? And that we've got opportunity, and demand is likely to be less throughout the remainder of the year to enable us to bring that back in line with last year's performance and hopefully improve on last year's performance. I also think it's worth noting that abandon rates are not necessarily a bad thing always. So if we're trying to encourage residents to go online and trying to encourage residents that can go online, abandon rates sometimes suggest that they're making that proactive choice to then do so. So they might have waited for a couple of minutes, they're listening to our queue messaging, they might be making that choice to then go and self-serve. That's not always the case, and it's very difficult for us to make that connection. So there is a bit of an assumption there. But then that's why we capture things like that customer satisfaction, customer effort, so we can try and pick out some of that insight and feedback from residents as we go as well to inform.
Right, okay, so this is something we just need to look at in the future on the rates to see whether they're changing. Thanks for that.
Councillor Clarkson, could I just add, if that's okay?
Yes, please do.
One interesting thing, we've never had data that really enables us to track somebody, as James is saying, through the system. We've recently moved on to a new telephony platform, and we now have access to that data. So from the point that somebody comes into the telephony system and to what point they pressed or abandoned their call, we're still getting our heads around it, as you can appreciate, because it's quite new to us, but it should give us a lot of that missing intelligence so that we can actually support what James is saying, or if we find actually we think it's because someone's using other channels and it's not, we'll be able to do some work on that. So I'm really excited about that. It creates a real opportunity for us to really delve into those issues.
That's very helpful to know, because this is one of the sort of feedbacks that we get, is the call waiting times can be off-putting. So to know that we've got something in the pipeline that could sort of give us more data on that, it's very useful to know. Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, Chair. Just to add to that as well, it's sometimes difficult to understand, if there are wait times. It's not always necessarily wait times for customer care. So obviously sometimes calls are put through via switchboard, sometimes calls go direct to teams, back office teams and officers, and sometimes there can be a perception that you're waiting to speak to customer care and what have you. So we're doing a lot of work with service areas as well to start to understand, building on what Linda said there around a new platform and those sorts of things, to really understand the entire kind of customer journey, not just that customer care element, because of course to our residents it doesn't make any difference to them whether they're speaking to customer care or planning or education. It's about that excellent customer service all the way through. So we are doing some work, and will be over the next few months, with those service areas to really understand their demand as well, and what can be done to support them through that digital service offer as well.
Okay, thank you. Move on to question 7. Councillor Dave Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, if I may, in case I don't have a chance to say this later, because it's quite late in the afternoon, I would just like to say to you, James, that I highly rate you as an officer in tour, and the work that you and your team is doing and ongoing. And the great thing I think about you, James, is you listen and you act very quickly. And I've got every confidence in your skill set and your team for your continuous works and improvements to all our systems. On to my question now, I've given you such lovely kudos. The telephone introductory segment is quite lengthy. It's quite a lengthy process, and with the answer phone system, I'm just wondering whether this could be shortened, because a lot of constituents that I speak to do say that it's very off-putting. The length of time everything's explained on the phone, and then it's done in Welsh. And sometimes people just hang up just because they just can't be bothered to listen to how long that takes. Any way we can shorten that, is there?
Thank you, Councillor, and thanks for your kind words. It'd be remiss of me not to recognise, obviously, this, the whole team effort behind this. So it's really great to see the impact that the team is having. You know, again, it's something that we constantly review in terms of queue messaging. We're fairly reactive, so if something is happening and we're able to alter queue messaging, you know, we try to do that to manage demand as effectively as possible. You touched upon Welsh and things like privacy notices, and there are certain things that we have to include to be compliant with the standards and guidelines that we need to adhere to. And like you say, there is value for us in providing some of that information around the availability of online services. Now, I understand that if you've come with a particular purpose, you know there's online services and you absolutely want to speak to an individual, that can be frustrating. But you know, like I say, we will commit and we continue to review. And where possible, we will improve it, absolutely. But there is value in kind of the queue messaging that we have at the moment, and it is used really effectively to manage demand. That's not to say it's perfect, nothing's ever perfect, and that's why we do continue to review it, and we welcome any feedback on that, which will help inform those reviews.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, Chair, don't get me wrong, I'm not asking you to get rid of the Welsh, because that would be not good at all. But if it could be shortened, that would be great. I think the whole process, not just the Welsh.
Yeah, and I think we're doing that, Linda, aren't we, as part of the new platform gives us new options, new capabilities. So as part of that, we are reviewing, you know, everything. But as Linda's touched upon, there's a lot to take in. It's a new system. So if you can bear with us, obviously we're working through what enables us to do differently. And like I say, where we can make improvements, we absolutely will. We want to make things as straightforward for our customers as possible.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Let me quickly bring in Councillor Horler.
I take on board Councillor Davies-Thomas. Could it be that we could have an option at the start of the call saying option 1 in English and option 2 in Welsh, and then you wouldn't have to carry on of going from one to another, to another, to another, so that the option would then be shortened in half? You know, welcome to Orion. If you want to hear this message in English, please press option 1. If you want to listen to it in Welsh, please option 2. And if you want to hear it in any other language, option 3. That would shorten the process of taking the person through those options. And that's also a case with many other companies. The Health Board have the same problem. There are people that would want it in Welsh, but the majority would want it in English. By pressing one option to get that service would be a lot quicker. Is that something we could look at, please?
I think it's something we can explore, Councillor Horler, so thanks for that suggestion. Perhaps bring Linda in and bow to your greater expertise in terms of the platform and potential barriers we've had in terms of the number of IVR options and things in the past, maybe that might have, I don't know, may have precluded us from doing that. But my view would be it is potentially something we can look at if it's proven to be, you know, an improved customer experience. But I'll hand over to you, Linda. You've got more expertise on that area.
Councillor Horler, there is already an option in place that you choose 1 for English or 2 for Welsh, because that's how we direct the traffic to the appropriate officers. I think I agree with you that there's a lot of information around privacy notices and things that come before that, and it may be something we can explore. Just for background for you all, with regards to the implementation of the new telephony, we had to map over what we had existing, but there's absolute room for improvement. I'm confident. Again, bear with us, as James said, because Reese is Assistant Customer Services Manager. We're still trying to get our head around everything, but this new system gives us a lot more control. But I think if I'm okay to say that, what would be really useful is to maybe test it with you guys first to get what you think would be appropriate, rather than us just put something in place which maybe we've been guilty of previously. You know, we would very much welcome that if we're looking to redesign how it works.
Yeah, happy with that, Councillor? Yeah, you know, that'd be a good idea to do that. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. More on to question 8. Call in Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is something that we have sort of touched on, but whether or not there would be any more information that we could receive maybe after the meeting is 4.2.7 aligns to the adoption of the Digital First Customer Strategy. Adult Services Council tax and benefit calls are prioritised over economy and environment, has already been stated. But can we have more detail on how the calls are actually dealt with, and whether or not we've got any indication of whether the system is working effectively, or if any issues within the prioritisation process have arisen so far? Just some more detail to round things off.
Yeah, we can certainly come back to you, Councillor Clarkson, with some more information around that. It's becoming a bit of a theme in terms of the answer, but again, the new telephony platform enables us to do this a lot more effectively. So in the past, it would have been reliant on Linda or Reece to monitor call volumes and those sorts of things, and move staff around manually into different call queues and those sorts of things. Obviously, when there's other priorities on, things can get not missed, but we just haven't got the time to be able to monitor that minute by minute, to be able to do that effectively. So whilst we've had that principle and we've made the best of the solution that we had available to us to manage it, there's much more scope within the new platform. I've lost track of how many times I've said that now this afternoon, but there is much more scope in that to manage that much more effectively. You can set things like thresholds, so when certain call queues reach a certain number of calls in a staff are moved over to those priority lines, and all these sorts of things are all done automatically, but it will again take us a bit of time to get used to that. We've acted on that already and put some of that in place, but obviously we need to monitor it moving forward, make sure it is effective. And over time, we might not be able to provide some of that insight right now. We perhaps need a couple of months for things to bed in and understand what we can get out of the system in terms of that data and what have you to demonstrate its effectiveness. But again, absolutely happy to provide that information once we've had a bit more time to get underneath some of that data and insight.
If it's okay to add to that, James, early indications are that, I'm putting my neck on the line here, but early indications are that it's having a very positive impact on abandon rates across the board, as in they are reducing because, as James has said, we've set the parameters so that it's automatically transferring the call to the right person. So, I can confidently say at the moment, I think we might need a few tweaks, but the early indications are that it's doing exactly what we need it to do. One of the other things I'd add to what James has said is we can also, and have in the past, used queue messaging to try and effectively promote alternative means of contacting us. I appreciate that sometimes people don't want to hear messages. We haven't built those into the new system yet, but in the past, Councillor Clarkson, what we've done is if somebody is on hold and we know that a summons run has gone and it's created a big spike in calls, we'll try and give individuals who may be calling us about an environmental concern an option to say, it's really busy at the moment, we really want to deal with your call, but did you know you could also do it online, and to give them the details and the option so that they've got more of an informed choice.
So we're early days.
We are, yes.
Thanks.
On that point, obviously we've spoken a lot about the manual, when it was all done manual with the customer care manager and assistant manager managing it all. And then obviously the recent implication of going on to a new platform. Has the implementation, how has it gone, and has there been many issues, please?
Would you like me to answer that one, James?
Yeah, you crack on, Linda. Yeah.
I'm really pleased. I think and I don't think we've had any issues. There have been no technical issues. We've had no negative feedback from residents. Obviously, if we did, we would take that into account. It's been a change for staff too. And I guess the most difficult bit has been for the staff getting used to the new system and how it works. But I think considering it was quite a tight time scale and it's such a cultural change for us, I think it's gone really well personally.
Yeah, and just to add, Chair, I think it can be understated, you know, the potential, you know, complexity of implementing such a new system. And I think one of the things, just for members' awareness, that this has come about off the back of some regional working. So this has been delivered as a collaborative project with the SRS and the SRS partnership in terms of local authorities, where officers like Linda and her counterparts have worked hard to understand what the requirements are and identify new system and work through the implementation. It's worked really well and is great testament to the officers involved in that process and the collaborative effort, because this would have been probably a lot more complex for us all, each local authority, if we'd have tried to attack this on our own and tried to do it individually. Okay,
thank you. Yeah, so very positive indeed. So move on to question 10. Councillor Nick Hawler, please.
This is relating to 4.2.9. There is currently a limited visibility and volumes broken down by service area and performance in terms of numbers of calls answered and abandoned. Why is there a limited visibility, and is there a potential way to address this? And secondly, in the last few months, I've been making phone calls to officers where they haven't picked up that call. But to my surprise, they've actually phoned me back within that time period, and I've gone shocked. That's really good of you, because that's a thoughtful message coming over. So that's my final bit of my question. My question is, that made me feel really positive, because that person has actually phoned me back because I put the phone down. Could this be the same for customers that talk to the organisation?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Hawler. So again, there's a couple of things on that. So largely systemic, why we haven't been able to, we haven't had a solution that's enabled us, as Linda touched upon earlier, to sort of track end to end. So if someone comes into customer care, we can track that, we can monitor performance, but once we try and hand it off to a back office, or it goes, I switch to the back office, our visibility ends because we haven't had that solution to enable us to report on it. We have now got that solution. And there's a couple of different ways that we can attack that. So Linda and I are actually taking something to our leadership team in the next few weeks to look at what those options are around being able to monitor that more effectively, what that kind of service standard should be, because of course a lot of the back office teams are operational, so it may be that they're not answering because they're out there doing the job, they're out in our communities doing what they need to do. So is it right that there is a call queue there, or is there another way that we should be capturing the demand from customers and trying to answer that more effectively? So it's not a small piece of work, but it is something that we're acutely aware of, and now we've got solutions in place, we can really tackle it and move that forward. And again, that will be a further improvement for the customer experience moving forward.
James, do you mind if I also add something to that? The callbacks in particular, Councillor Hawler, is a new functionality that we've put live since we've had the new telephony system. So any call that goes through the contact centre, the person ringing has the ability, if they need to put the phone down, to actually request a call back, and then my team will call them back. We've never been able to do that before, but this platform enables us to do that, and it's good for me to hear that that's working. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. From my point of view, to get a call back on a phone call that you weren't expecting because you really needed to speak to that person and couldn't get through to them on the first time, it's really appreciated, and hats off to you guys for doing that, because that's made my life better, because I haven't had to follow back with another phone call to get hold of the person. That person knows that I want to talk to them, and they've come back to me when they've been able to come back to me and talk to me. And that would be really good to see that across the whole board for customers for Torvine that actually use that switchboard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Move to question 11. Councillor Linda Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. This is around customer care and capture satisfaction and efforts following interactions and the feedback that we get, really. So what level of feedback rate do we actually experience? So have we been able to capture that? And obviously this new system, does that manage to capture that? And during that process, do we ask people in the post-interaction survey why they called rather than using the digital route, so that we can gain deeper understanding if it's access to digital equipment, digital literacy, difficulty finding an appropriate digital avenue, or simply a preference to speak to a person?
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Yes, so that's the type of questions that we include in the survey. Again, we can share the survey, the content of it with members following the meeting. That's absolutely no problem. So there's a couple of elements to it. So customer satisfaction is not a perfect sort of measure, because what we're trying to measure is that satisfaction with your experience speaking to customer care. But of course, if your issue's not resolved for whatever reason, it might be that the policy doesn't allow us to do it, or whatever. Obviously, that can skew that score. But it's a well-used measure to try and understand, broadly how satisfied customers are. The elements that you just started to refer to then, in terms of, well, why have you rang instead of the digital, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve through that customer effort score. So how easy was it for you to do what you wanted to do through the channel of choice? Have you rang us because you've tried to use an online service and you couldn't make head nor tail of it, so you've picked up the phone? And that enables us then, in theory, to use that insight to target improvements within that digital offering for that particular service. So that's exactly what we try and use it for. In terms of the uptake on it, we average, I think it's approximately about 90 surveys per month at the moment, the year to date, which isn't a bad figure, but obviously it's quite a small proportion when you look at the total volume of contacts that we receive. And we've received more in the past, but we're obviously, we've refined and reviewed the kind of services that we offer that survey off the back of. There was some feedback from members, I think, that the survey was going out too many, repeatedly and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to get that balance right between sending it out an appropriate level, appropriate volumes, and not sort of spamming customers, but also giving us the breadth of insight that we need for it to be really actionable. So again, it's something that's under review. And again, we'll say it again, the new telephony platform has within it a survey module, which again will enable us to do this far more effectively moving forward. It's on the kind of roadmap of things we're looking at, Linda, isn't it, in terms of developments, improvements. But that's one of the real benefits of that system, alongside some of the things that we've already covered. It'd be far more intuitive and easy for us to capture some of that information and generate those actionable insights for us.
It's quite timely. I actually attended a meeting a couple of hours ago, which was with the other local authorities to talk about next steps now that we've all introduced the new telephony, and looking at feedback is the next step. Councillor Clarkson, to answer one of your questions, what we're not effective at the moment is being able to really get as much insight as we'd like off the back of a call, and we know that's where our highest demand is. This tool will enable us to do that. So it will be governed by the customer services officers, but at the end of a call, it will enable a person to opt in or out of whether they'd like to provide some feedback.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I was thinking of. This new telephony system sounds spot on, doesn't it?
It does. Anyone would think that we work to try and get what we need.
Okay, thank you very much. More to question 12. I'd like to ask Councillor Steve Evans, please.
I think you answered most of this, to be honest, on the last question with Linda. But the part of it, are we looking to alter some of the forms, redesign anything to make it far swifter and easier? And are the processes going to be different, or are you going to keep the same type of process? What's going to happen to make sure you're making it efficient?
I'm not sure we've got time to go through all the plans that we've got in place, Councillor Evans, to tackle some of this. I think we've covered quite extensively some of the work that's going off the back of the new telephony platform. There's also some work Linda's doing to improve our chatbot and the experience there for residents when they choose to use our chatbot, through integration with our our CRM system, so that someone can actually report things rather than just be signposted to an area of the website to find the information out themselves. There's also a range of work that we're undertaking around the development of My Council services. Lots of plans there, particularly around how can we better integrate it with systems used by our back office, our service areas. And I think we touched upon this a little bit earlier in terms of that flow of information. So what can be really frustrating for customers at the moment is if they report something online, on occasions it can sort of disappear into the ether. So I've reported a pothole, for example, and whilst we've processed it and it's gone through the system, it's gone to the team responsible for reviewing it, and that review will be taking place, that's not visible to the customer because we haven't got that joined up system sort of behind the scenes. So what we're looking to do moving forwards with some of those key systems is what's called integrate them, so that once a customer has reported something online, it goes straight to the team, the individual responsible for carrying out that inspection. If take the example of a pothole, they'll have a mobile device, they can go out and inspect it, they can record the outcome of that inspection, and that information can be fed back to the customer if they opt in to receive that. And what we expect by that is to improve customer experience. It should reduce demand. We do get people that ring off the back of that. I've either rang to report something, I've done it online, I'm not sure what's going on, I'm going to pick up the phone to try and find out. That will come through to customer care. That puts more pressure on us in terms of performance and takes us away from those real value-added type contacts that we want to focus on. And also, as we touched upon earlier, often that can be escalated to members, which means that you have to chase and try and find out what's going on. So that's one of the key areas we're looking at in terms of the development of My Council services. Again, not straightforward pieces of work, but we've got a plan to deliver on that and improve that customer experience moving forwards. George, I don't know if there's anything you want to add in relation to that, but that's broadly what we're looking to do. And as you touched upon earlier, Councillor Evans, it's about constantly reviewing those forms. Are they appropriate? Are they easy to use? That's drawn from the insight we get from things like the customer effort, customer satisfaction surveys and other sort of user research that we undertake. And I think a really good example is the bulky collections form, which has been reviewed not that long ago. So I'm not sure if members are familiar with it, but in the past, just because of systemic issues and what have you, it was quite a clunky process. You weren't sort of given an automatic day relevant to your postcode, relevant to your address. You had to sort of navigate your way through it. It's much more intuitive now. We know based on where you live what day we're going to be in that area, so therefore you can only book on certain days and so on and so forth. So it's a much more streamlined process and a much better customer experience. It's about doing that across the board with our remaining forms. We're constantly looking to improve them and make life easier for our customers.
Thank you, Gene, for that comprehensive answer. Very good one.
Okay, thank you very much. Just quick one for myself is about the targets for each of the performance measures. Do you think they are ambitious enough?
I think so. I'm smiling because Linda and I have this discussion quite regularly around ambition, and like we touched upon earlier, there's value in a higher abandon rate for certain calls. So our economy and environment suggests we're getting that prioritisation right in terms of our resources being focused on revs and bends calls, adult services calls, and their performance is better, if you like. Abandon rates are lower, wait times are lower. But again, we do constantly review. We don't want to be too over-ambitious. Like I say, it's a tough job in customer care. You don't really know what you're going to be faced with when someone walks through the door or picks up the phone. So it's a tough job, and they do really, really well, and you can see that through the trends in terms of performance. And obviously, if we slapped a really far too ambitious target, that can affect morale and those sorts of things. So we do look to keep it balanced. We constantly review historic performance and demand and that whole mix of measures that we've got to try and make sure that our performance targets are pitched at the right sort of level so that we are pushing, but it's realistic, it's achievable as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I'd just like to ask members now, would you like to put forward any recommendations at this point on the customer care performance? Councillor Horler?
I think David mentioned about the options going onto the telephone system. I think in agreement, Dave, would you say that we should be looking at potentially having a change of that on options? So we went into an option 1 for English and an option 2 for Welsh. The start of the call instead of halfway through the call. It was your question, Dave. I kind of got on
well, to be really honest, I think I've got every confidence in James and his team now. So I think he's got that idea that we've given. But yeah, I think we could put that down. But I've got every confidence that James and the team will act on that.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to a few questions on development activity, and that moves us on to question 14. I'd like to call in Councillor Dave Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. This question relates to 4.3.1 in the report. Whilst difficult to measure, it is expected that a proportion of calls dealt with by customer care can be defined as failure demand. If we were to capture this information, would it not be possible to create metrics to then monitor the progress?
Yes, absolutely. Again, it's a balancing act, Councillor Thomas, between how we would capture some of that data and the sort of level of which we need to capture it for it to be informative for us, if I'm explaining that correctly. So we would potentially need customer care advisors to spend quite a bit of time maybe identifying exactly what the area related to and those sorts of things. Of course, when a customer rings and a service request is created, we can report on that really easily. It's a fly tip or it's a pothole or it's a missed bin or whatever, we can report on that. When it's an information-only call, it becomes a little bit more difficult to report easily and capture that insight in terms of what it relates to, without adding extra sort of work onto the customer care advisor to do it. Linda, it's something that we talk about regularly, isn't it, in terms of, failure demand and those kind of information-only calls and how we capture them. I think my view is we do our best at the moment to try and understand what that's telling us, combined with some of the other insight we get from things like the customer effort scores and those sorts of things. Is there anything that you could suggest or that we're already looking at in that regard around failure demand type calls, information-only calls?
I'd say there's two things. Integration, which you've mentioned, with back office systems is vital, because a lot of failure demand is for the reasons that you've mentioned, that there aren't updates being provided to residents, so residents are having to ring to find out. I would say that that's one of the biggest failure demand. The other thing I think is that, we can only do so much within the contact centre, and we're very much reliant on our colleagues in the back office. And, if thousands of letters are going out with difficult wording, we know that those are going to generate a spike in calls. If they're sent in one day, it is very likely that they would cause a spike in calls, and we're not able to get to all of those calls at the same time. So I think assistance from colleagues, looking and reviewing processes so we're working in conjunction with one another and thinking about the customer first in all of our interactions, and secondly, integration. It's vital, really, so that we've got that end-to-end tracking of a process. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's perfect for me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Move on to question 15. I call in Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's looking at the area of the report 4.3.2, where you've given an example, work is being carried out to integrate My Council services with the Alloy system. So there's that word integration again. So that caused some debate about, can you provide us with further information of the impact and benefits that will arise from this integration? We weren't sure what the Alloy system was, and what is the anticipated timeline when integration may take place?
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah. So in terms of timeline, it should be imminent. We're working with our supplier, so Aberfus, who supply the My Council services system, to get that confirmed. But we're hoping in the next sort of couple of months, really, that we'll be able to at least get to the point where we can test that integration, obviously prior to it going live. It's a system that's used extensively in sort of highway, street scene type services. So again, high volume contact areas for us, for the council. And yeah, it's really the points that we've been over, I suppose, a couple of times in terms of that flow of information. So once we've got it integrated, customers will find it much easier, should they opt into it, to receive updates and understand where their request is in the process, rather than it going into that void and them not knowing, you know, they know it's been received, but do they know that an inspection's planned or been carried out, what the outcome of that inspection was. So all these things, you know, are potentially available to us to provide us status updates to residents moving forwards. And to refer back to Councillor Thomas's question, and that should then reduce, obviously, that what we term failure demand, and that additional demand into the contact centre, with residents perhaps ringing to chase what's happened to their service request. So it's really, really important to us to get that right, get the service status updates right, to provide residents with the information that they need and want, so that they don't feel that they have to contact us again. Like I say, Alloy is a system, and we can provide, again, you know, further breakdown in terms of the services which use Alloy. But then there are other systems out there which we then look to replicate, so we've got much more uniformity in terms of our approach moving forwards.
So, if I may, Chair, just to add on that, at the moment you usually get your 10 days to respond sort of message initially, which can cause some sort of concern. So this type of system would do away with that message by giving something a little bit more structured as a response?
Potentially. I mean, we'll need to work with service areas to understand, you know, their kind of service standards and what have you, but it gives us that flexibility to enable us to review that. Whilst there still might be a service standard around a certain number of days, what that would give you is more information as part of that process, if you like. So rather than feeling, well, it's day 9 now, you know, what's going on, and I'm perhaps going to ring for an update. You know, you might have received something on day 4 to say, I don't know, an inspection's planned. Now, I can't say that all this is going to happen right from the get-go. Like I say, we need to do that work with service areas to understand what the service standard is, what the offer is. But what it will give us through that integration is the ability to be able to do much more of this, to again improve and streamline that customer journey.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. 2 further questions on development activity, and both questions are raised by Councillor Nicola, please.
This relates to 4.3.5. It's about the communication team, the working services areas, to review work content to ensure the relevant, easy to understand signposts efficiently to digital services where appropriate. Work is ongoing to determine how to monitor the impact on the website's improvement. My question is, in addition to the work reviewing the website content and the communication team promoting and highlighting digital services to the residents, so how are you actually getting that out to the residents? I use the app occasionally from my personal point of view. It's very, very easy to operate, but I don't see many adverts about that app on board anywhere. I don't see that happening. And if more people use that app, and the efficiency of the app and how you actually use the app and pressing the images and putting all that information into that app, then I'm sure that life would be an awful lot easier than potentially looking anywhere else. But we don't see that app advertised as much as I would like to see it advertised, and I'm sure many others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawley. Yeah, it's a really helpful suggestion, helpful feedback in terms of your experience with the app. And again, that's something that's kind of in train at the moment. So again, Linda and the team are linking in a lot with communications at the moment to improve that awareness, really, in terms of what we've got available, in terms of the app, what it can be used for. Like I touched upon earlier, more seasonal promotion, so it's specific to the types of inquiries that we know we're going to get more of. So as you've come into the Civic this morning, you might have seen posters up in the kind of customer care area promoting the use of the app to report certain services, certain service requests. So that's definitely something that we're looking at the moment and actively looking to encourage and promote its use more effectively moving forwards. And the other thing I think which is worth pointing out is Linda touched upon it earlier, it's that kind of assisted digital type approach. So if you come into the Civic, into our customer care area, if you come into perhaps Cumberland Library, those sorts of areas, we've got those tablets which enable self-service, but we know that some people might need a bit of help to access them and understand it. But the thinking being there, if we can be there to help them, show them, guide them through using that tablet, maybe the first time, maybe the second time they come into the Civic, maybe the third time they'll have the confidence to do that on their own device and what have you. So this links in with our ambition in the digital first customer strategy around empowering our residents to be able to thrive in that digital world.
Yeah, certainly. The second question.
Yeah, sorry. This relates to 4.3.6. To provide a better data and insight into the customer journey from the switchboard to the back office teams, a reporting tool has been procured. When will this reporting tool be in operation, and when will the service standards be agreed for?
So there's a bit of work to do on this, Councillor Hawler. So in terms of service standards, as I said, Linda and I are taking something into our leadership team colleagues in the near future, beginning of December, I think it is, to start to work through what those service standards should be. Off the back of that, then we understand, what what technical requirements there are and all those sorts of things, and then we can build the reporting tool off the back of it. So I'd like to think it would be this financial year. But, we're certainly working towards resolving that as quickly as possible. But I think, as you'll have appreciated from the range of other things we've got going on, there's plenty that we're doing to try and improve the customer experience. So it's about just trying to prioritise those things that have the biggest impact, really. But it's definitely something that we're working on at the moment. Perhaps after that engagement with the leadership team, we'd be able to provide you with a bit more of a specific timescale for delivering on that.
So these service standards that are based on Torvine, do you talk to any other councils within Wales to talk about where their service standards lay, and are we going to get more of a universal service standard for Wales as a whole, or is it for each county to have their own standards?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a criteria where we all kind of meet the same standard of service across the Wales?
I'm not aware of anything sort of forthcoming in that area. I can only speak from a kind of customer care perspective. And it's quite difficult to benchmark customer care performance in particular, because we all do things slightly differently. So we'll take calls and deal with contacts that perhaps neighbouring authorities or other authorities in Wales don't provide, don't answer, and vice versa. So it can be quite difficult when you try and benchmark what is customer care and what's the sort of standard in terms of performance. So I'm not aware of any wider drivers on that.
Okay, thank you very much. On the development then, if any members would like to put forward any recommendations at this point on the activity, the development activity? Just thinking perhaps a quick one. As councillors, perhaps we should take a bit of responsibility and familiarise ourselves with the app and put that out amongst our wards. Obviously helping out and pushing it, because it is our responsibility as well, and it makes life easier for all around. So it's just a quick point that I think we should be taking on board, if you don't mind.
So could we put a recommendation in for that, but also the fact that we need to push the app more into the public's domain? Because I think it is a useful app to use. Most people have phones now with technology for apps. In the last few weeks, I've been using or looking at the app, and it's so easy to use. And if that was making the customer experience easier, and then you about it, then that would be a really good recommendation Mark, thank you.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Welcome
Really,
back.
really welcome that suggestion. I think that would be really helpful. It might be that we need to do a seminar or some kind of training to support members to feel confident in use of the app and then being able to promote it.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea. We now move on to digital inclusion. And that brings us to question 18. I'd like to call in Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thanks again, Chair. 4.4.2 of the report, talking about something that we've just touched on briefly, support currently provided in our libraries via ICT and digital sessions, which are a lot about education, and obviously people can ask for assistance to use forms initially. So the question we've got is, are we also using other sources of digital drop-ins? I know we've got the Connect or Vine iPads now going out into community hubs and community spaces. So that, is there somewhere closer to residents' communities so that they can drop into and actually have some assistance with reporting, without having to go to the library or the civic centre, which for some residents, especially our more hard to reach, maybe elderly, maybe people with mobility issues, may be a barrier towards towards actually using the services.
Thanks, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah, really recognise that and welcome that suggestion. I think it ties in really nicely with that community's approach as well. How do we tap into support that's probably already out there in our community, so it doesn't necessarily always need to be council-led. Some of this will be happening, but I think the key to it is trying to coordinate it a little bit more effectively. So I think I reference in the report that you've got TVA, you've got Bronavon doing similar type of activity. Like I say, it might be that you go to your local rugby club and you've got a tech wizard there who can help residents, support them to use technology. How do we better promote some of these things? How do we raise awareness so that there isn't that perception that to get this kind of support you've got to come to Cumbrae Library or Blynavan Library or the Civic Centre? It's just about better coordination and I think better visibility of what support's on offer across our communities, because it is out there, it is happening, but we need to try and work with our partners to pull it together a little bit more coherently, I think.
Yeah, I think it just blends in nicely with the Connect or Vine iPads now going out. If they could be sort of, it may be that some of the halls or areas that are holding those for the local authority may need some training in how to use them themselves. But it seems like an ideal opportunity to provide something more within people's communities, within their community hubs. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for that.
And I think just to add, sorry, Chair, Councillor Clarkson, so that is part of the rollout approach in terms of those Connect or Vine devices. It does come with some training so that people feel able to provide that support in their locality. I think the other thing that we've started to discuss is, what we don't want necessarily is where we've got an iPad or whatever in the Civic or Cumbrae Library, we don't necessarily need another one in that location, because then that's confusing for residents, isn't it? We want something that meets all needs where possible. There are technical barriers that we need to overcome and what have you, but we don't want a kind of tablet for Torvine and a tablet for Connect Torvine and something else for Bronavon and something else for, so it's about, again, that coordination and putting the customer at the heart of our kind of decision making, our planning around this, to make it easy for them to access the support that they need and want, most effectively.
Yeah, good partnership working. Thanks for the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. That perfectly answered question 19 as well. So we'll move on to question 20 and bring in Councillor Nicola, please.
This is relation to 4.4.3. In partnership with Bronavon and TVA, support residents and community groups with their digital service access. Digital inclusion should be for everybody, partly sighted, blind. How can we get involved with Torvine Digitals? How can we get those members of the public involved in those digital services? Have we worked in partnership with accessible organisations to ensure developing provision? And I take this one step further. There are many people within our community, including myself, that are very, very dyslexic, and sometimes it's better to have a face-to-face conversation than it is to tap on a bot or anything else. So is there anything that we can actually do for those people that either partly blind or partly sighted or have dyslexia, that have a fear of a website or a fear of an app, actually making contact with Torva?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hawler. Yeah, I think there's a range of things we can do and a range of things that we've already started to look at. So we did some quite extensive consultation and engagement around the strategy, the Digital First Customer Strategy in its formation, including engaging with the Torfaen Accessibility Forum, town and community councils, 50+ forums, those sorts of things, to really tune in to some of those issues. I think it's fair to say we can continue that, perhaps again more effectively than we have done recently. We've also done some work to understand some research and discovery work around digital inclusion, digital exclusion type barriers and what that means to our communities and so on and so forth, to factor that into our kind of service plan and service delivery. There are also a number of tools which, and I absolutely take your point, some people, you know, have that preference to engage with us face-to-face or over the phone, and like I said earlier, it's a digital-first principle, not digital only, so, you know, we've got that option there. But there are also tools that can make life easier through using, you know, digital tools. We've had some success recently, you know, internally with officers using some of our digital solutions to help staff who might have dyslexia or those sorts of barriers to be able to access documents and understand, you know, go through induction processes, those sorts of things. So there's a range of options around this. I think where we perhaps struggle around digital inclusion is not having that resource necessarily currently to be able to really focus in on it. So it is about how do we work as effectively as possible with our partners, both in the public sector, you know, and the partners that we've discussed already, like TVA, like Bronavon, to coordinate this effectively, make best use of the resources collectively we've got available to us to really understand, hone in on some of those issues and support customers around some of these issues.
From my point of view, being very dyslexic, there are times when I think it's a lot easier to have that face-to-face conversation, and if I've got a member of my community that won't get hold of me, 9 times out of 10 that's now done via social media, and we tend to have a face-to-face conversation that makes it a lot easier for me to understand the circumstances or what's going on, but it also shows the actual feelings about what's the contents of the conversation. Yeah, I understand that the written word is fine, but many times it's easy to understand that person's projection that she's actually trying to make contact with you to actually get the result that you need to get. So this idea of having the ability to have a face-to-face conversation, to me, as a dyslexic, is really beneficial on the way to move forward, to be able to get my point of view over, and also the point of view of a dyslexic that just does not want to sit down with a pen and paper and write something down and not get it right because they're embarrassed about the situation that they have. So anything that can benefit the movement to be able to get more inclusion with that type of person and also the blind within the community would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hawler. So a couple of things to add, I guess. Absolutely take your points in terms of preferences and what have you. One of the things we're looking to do, so we've got a bit of a balancing act in terms of the staff we've got available to us within customer care. It's not a large team, and obviously we manage face-to-face appointments, we manage things like reception, cash offices, and also telephony. So one of the things we're trying to do, because obviously we offer appointments on set days, not every day in every location, is develop an option around video teleconferencing type facility. So it's not that in person necessarily, but it is still a kind of face-to-face offer, and that's something we've been piloting recently with some success. So you know, we'll definitely be looking to build on that as we move forwards. So there are lots of things that we're looking at. Another area that we're currently working through at the moment is things like sign language training for some of our, so BSL training for some of our customer care staff, so recognising that there's some need within our communities to do that. Linda, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm not sure where we've got to in terms of training, but that's something you identified as a potential need and sourced that training, wasn't it, for members of your team to take forward to better equip us to meet that need that's out there in our communities.
I I have 2 members of staff who volunteered. It's a year's course, so they'll have a real substantial understanding of British Sign Language. Interestingly as well, it's quite topical. I attended a meeting this morning which was around building deaf and blind awareness. And it was coordinated through, I'm just looking at my notes, so bear with me, the Wales Council for Deaf People. It's something that Stephen Honeywell is actively exploring at the moment, and I learned a lot about simple, and I haven't had an opportunity to speak to James about this yet because it's literally just happened, but there is some real inexpensive technology that we could be using within front-facing areas, which would really significantly help those with sight impairments and visual impairments, deaf, all of those things. So I think it's something that's really important. It's really important to us, and it's something that we certainly need to heighten our awareness of and make sure that we're meeting individuals' requirements.
Okay, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Really good. Move on to question 21. Councillor Dave Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. This question relates to 4.4.4. I like that. The Council has recently commissioned work to map out mobile coverage by provider across the county borough. When are we anticipating the feedback from this commissioned work, and how will we use it to develop our services?
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'll hand this one over to George, if I may. He's led on this piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. We've commissioned a company through Shared Prosperity funding, Streetwave, and the purpose is to get an accurate reading of mobile phone coverage in Torvine. If you've had the opportunity to look online, O2, Vodafone, EE, their providers, it's all based on estimations. So Streetwave offer a service whereby they literally drive around every single street, road of Torvine, and we've got 2 drive rounds being done on that. One's been done already. So we have had the data produced, and it's pretty much ready to go, just going through comms to make sure it's accessible. We're getting the right message out, and it is being made available to everybody. But the real key benefit to that is, one, it allows us as an organisation to identify where there are perhaps non-spots, where signal perhaps out on the roads for social cares, environmental workers, anybody out on the roads in their day-to-day job, one can do so safely, can do so with great connectivity and speed, become more efficient, productive, etc., etc. But then more so for the customers of Torvine, being able to make an informed decision on what's the best provider, not go online and have a look at and go, oh, right, I think O2 is fantastic, and then you get your phone, you go home and you realise the signal's awful, and you signed up to that 6-12 month contract, and that happens to everybody, and there's some substantial figures available across the UK on perhaps wasted phone contracts. So we look to empower, provide this information to all of the customers of Torvine and residents, and make sure they can make an informed decision on which is the best provider to go through.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, Chair, just quickly, it's interesting you should say that, mention this about networks and stuff, because a lot of taxi drivers that come down to the beautiful side of Lantarnham that are on O2 can't use their cardless readers because they can't get the signal. So the provider may well feed that back to you guys, but the signal, 5G signal in Lantarnham is pretty bad, especially if you're on O2.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Move on to question 22, and it's Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. This question sort of builds on the previous one, but it's looking about you talked to us about you're going to have data about households which haven't got any connectivity to the internet, and we've just spoken about mobile networks. So what we were looking at was with digital exclusion related to connectivity. If we do identify properties that haven't got access to the internet, would we be able to use that information to offer a more targeted approach to maybe mail drops, working with providers to improve connectivity if it is a connection issue? And also, data poverty is now a thing as well. So have we got any sort of mechanisms on board to inform people who may be having issues with data poverty on these very affordable but limited contracts where they run out of data? I know some providers now are offering data free for certain periods of the year. So it's around that sort of thing. Would we be able to be more targeted to people that we know they've got no connectivity, so that they are then included rather than excluded because of the greater use of digital, and whether or not we're covering these areas of connectivity drops with internet access and data poverty? Sorry about that, there's quite a bit of question in there.
No, thank you, Councillor Clark. Some really, really good points there. I mean, in terms of broadband, there's an element of this being sort of commercially led in terms of suppliers and you know, where they then look to invest in things like fibre to the property and those sorts of things. But there's absolutely some things we can do as a council to lobby. There are funding pots out there and available to try and address, you know, not spot areas and those sorts of things. Again, it's the kind of resource that we've got available to us, and how do we do this in a more connected way with partners to access potentially some of that funding for the benefit of our residents. I definitely think there's something around the promotion of, you know, we talk about data poverty and you know, there are schemes out there. I want to say, but again, we'd have to come back to you with more detail, that we've got areas within our community wellbeing service that provide some support around these sorts of things. Certainly in our libraries we've offered, and through the support of community and wellbeing service, we offer like you know, device loaning and those sorts of things. So we have got schemes that we either deliver or that we can connect people to and raise awareness of some of those things, because these are real issues, aren't they, being experienced by our communities. So it's just about understanding what's out there, what support is available, and how best people can access that support moving forward.
Okay, thank you. At this point then, have any members got any, or would like to put any recommendations forward about digital inclusion?
I think we go back to the question that I asked about for the blind and for those people that are disabled, and the conversation that Linda made. Is there any way that we could investigate that more to make that area of our community better, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to the concluding questions. Brings us up to question 23. I'd like to bring back in Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Bear with me a second, Chair. Sticky buttons. The statement, and we're looking at the Section 5 consultation. The statement under Section 5 refers to consultation on the report. However, consultation didn't occur with officers from other service areas to identify issues in making this report. We were looking at the independent survey, the external survey that was carried out regarding this was it 22, 24, the dates it covered, and that highlighted some of the issues of collaboration and consultation within organisations to sort of highlight areas of difficulty. So I suppose that's the question. Is any of that sort of engagement happening? You've told us about the, trying to remember the name of it now, the digital steering group. So is there a bit more information around how that's sort of actually done, please?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah, so that group has been formed, I want to say, for about 6 months now. And like I say, that's got a role in terms of developing that collaborative effort and understanding of digital data and technology across the organisation. I think it's working well so far. We've got good engagement from service areas. We've now got a full complement of directorates represented on that group. And like I say, they play a key role in sort of smoothing over the delivery of some of the things that we've talked about today, bringing forward ideas and advocating for things that need to be prioritised. So I think, as we've outlined today, there's an awful lot that needs to be done. There's an awful lot that we are trying to do. We can't do it all at once. So we use that steering group as a mechanism to understand priorities. So it's not just who shouts loudest gets their work done. It's a real collaborative understanding of what's going to be of most benefit to us as an organisation, our residents, and so on and so forth. So that group, as it evolves, will play a really key role in driving some of the priorities and making sure that we are collaborating and making sure that there is that shared understanding of, you know, what digital data and technology can do for service areas, can do for residents, and how do we implement some of these solutions effectively across the council. So it's perhaps remiss of me to say that we're constantly sort of engaging and collaborating on this. You know, a lot of the work that we do in that digital space that George and the team work on is driven by service areas and their needs and so on and so forth. So there is an awful lot of collaboration that goes on around all this, and like I say, that key bit around prioritisation of effort to make sure that we're delivering on the things that are going to be most impactful for our residents and for the organisation.
Thank you for that. So I think that's what I was trying to draw out, and that prioritisation of effort, which seems so important with such a big task in front of us, that we're dealing with things we're going to make the most impact first. Thanks for the answer.
Okay, thank you. Move on to question 24. Bring in Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think you've covered most of this, but what I would add is what are you bringing into the digital thing? What are you waiting for, and how quick you would train your staff to use it?
Sorry, Councillor Evans, could you just repeat that? I didn't quite catch the question.
What it is about digitally training your staff to deal with all this. Are you waiting to bring anything into that digital system? And if so, how quick would it be for the training for your staff to use that to make sure that it's operational?
Thanks, Councillor Evans. Yeah, really good question. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, but what we're trying to achieve through our kind of delivery of the digital first customer strategy is exactly that. It's upskilling our staff, our workforce, to be able to make use of some of these digital solutions. There's obviously central expertise within the SRS and within my team, but again, as we've touched upon, we can't do everything all at once. So part of the work that, again, George is leading on with colleagues in HR and OD and other areas is to develop kind of training pathways that will enable staff to develop the confidence to use some of those, they call them like low-code, no-code type solutions that you know, can be done with a bit of support. So what that means is we don't create a bottleneck of, you know, lots of opportunity, lots of ideas, but it hits that bottleneck trying to get into my team, into the SRS, and then there's frustration that we're not moving as quickly as possible. So we feel there's a certain level of you know, digital capability which we can achieve across the organisation, which will enable us to do some of this a little bit quicker. And like I say, that then leaves us with a bit of space and a bit of capacity to do some of the more complicated pieces of work, the integrations, those sorts of things that we touched upon earlier. So this is a live project as we're moving through at the moment. George, I won't put you on the spot in terms of timelines because it's a big piece of work, but I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of some of the detail in terms of what we're doing with colleagues in HR and OD.
Yeah, happy to. Like you say, timelines are very difficult to put on something like this because it is ongoing. The learning journey, especially around digital skills and capabilities, will never end. And the pace of change in the digital world is faster now more than ever. You know, what you know with an application now, 6 months from today, is perhaps going to change, or there'll be new software or something added on to it. So what we've been working really hard with the team is want to establish a pipeline to facilitate that change and that demand. So we've been able to work alongside, as James mentioned, colleagues with OD, HR, to ensure that we can meet that demand and do so effectively, and making sure that we get the right level of skills to the organisation so they can deliver confidently in their job with the tools that they have got available to them, but then taking it a step above that and then looking at the more expertise skills, where perhaps certain individuals in teams can use some of the more specialist tools available to us, but as a council we can continually to build that digital resilience and capability for us as an organisation. And that's something that we've not had before as an organisation. It's something, you know, perhaps many years ago that may have been one person, for example, who is the go-to person in the team. And unfortunately, if that person left, there'd be a real gap in those skills and digital skills and capability. And that's something we are very aware of. We don't want to happen. So we're doing everything we can to ensure there's a real strong resilience in digital skills across the organisation. But unfortunately, Councillor Evans, no, we're not able to give timelines. But we are looking at, specifically at the moment, revamping the Digital Champions Network within Torvine, which we look to revamp and republish by the end of April for the organisation. And that will look to really hone and develop some more top-tier digital skills within the organisation, looking at something specifically around Power Platform, which will allow for automations and increased productivity and efficiency within teams.
Excellent. Thank you for your comprehensive answers, both.
Thank you.
No problem.
And just to add to that, and touched upon it earlier, in terms of those collaborative projects that we're working with, you know, neighbouring local authorities as part of that SRS partnership. So how can we do this again in a more coordinated way? So if we're all broadly trying to achieve the same sorts of things, let's do it once, not 4 or 5 times, you know. So those principles are really well embedded now across digital teams, across that SRS partnership, which is really positive.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Move on to question 25 now. Bring back in Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking really at budgetary pressures now. The recent external audit report that I mentioned earlier highlighted, and it may well be out of date by now, I understand that, but it highlighted that there weren't a lot of costings regarding how to revamp the digital systems and to improve the customer services on offer via digital offer. So without those costings, I'm just wondering how we can measure the cost effectiveness and the efficiency savings. A forthcoming cross-cutting report is mentioning efficiency savings which are anticipated through the digital customer sort of offer. But the baselines, where are we getting the baselines from? Has that been looked at now? If not, how are we going to be able to do that so that we can look going forward at how effective it's been from a budgetary point of view?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Clarkson. Again, really good point and fair assertion. I mean, we're much sharper now in terms of working with service areas to understand what the benefits will be of undertaking some work around digital transformation with them. And, you know, that can be efficiencies, it can be that improved customer experience, it can be reduced demand, it could be staff well-being. But we're much more focused now when we engage with those teams to understand, well, that's great if we do this, but A, what will the impact be? And then B, have we actually realised those benefits? So that's built into our processes now. There's a little bit of chicken and egg around this because you've got to do quite a bit of work sometimes in some of these areas to really understand what those benefits will be. But that's why we're looking to join up that initial understanding of what we think the benefits are, and then making sure we go back and revisit and say, well, have we actually achieved them? And we're building those measures into our reporting moving forwards. So again, in terms of service plan, in terms of, you know, balanced scorecards and all those sorts of things, we'll be measuring to what extent have we delivered on the benefits that we anticipated through carrying out individual projects and pieces of work. So yeah, just to provide some assurance, we are much more focused on that now moving forward.
And could I, if it's okay, Chair, could I just ask regarding procurement? I know you're talking a lot of the work is collaborative and it's sort of within and with other local authorities. But are there any budgetary pressures for you regarding any procurement you may need to do outside of those areas?
There's nothing really live at the moment. We're fairly well set in terms of the solutions that we've got available to us, but that will always be a challenge when we're looking at, you know, renewals and potential new solutions and those sorts of things. What we are focused on is making the best use of what we've already got available to us as the first port of call. Right. So if we've got a solution or a system that will get us sort of 90% of the way there, is that good enough? Can we make use of that system rather than going off and buying something that's going to get us 100% of the way there? So we've got to understand where, you know, that level of tolerance around compromise and what have you. But again, referring back to one of your earlier questions around the DDAT steering group, again, that's one of the roles there that we're looking to bring into that group. Some ability to kind of review, you know, if someone's suggesting we need to go out and buy something, well, let's bring that into that forum, let's review what we've already got available to us, how it could be used, and those sorts of things before we go and buy. So there is always that risk around procurement whenever we're talking about new systems, but we're trying to put in place processes that make sure that when we do take that step to procure, we've explored all of our avenues first to make use of the investments that we've already made in our systems. You know, the other impacts are obviously inflationary rises and those sorts of things, but that's not unique clearly to digital. That's a pressure across the board.
Right. Thank you very much for the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Moves us on now to question 26. Bring in Councillor Nick Hall again, please.
Chair, I have two questions on this one, if that's possible.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so in a previous life, I worked within an organisation that had a network that crossed the country. That system failed, and it brought the whole network down for the whole country. What resilience does our system have if the digital solution fails for Torvine? Because obviously we're now talking about more digital inclusion, we're talking about everything going one way. What happens if that fails? And my second question, which wasn't clear, what artificial intelligence are you currently looking at, or where are you going with artificial intelligence? Which obviously talking about bots and we're talking about other issues. How far are you going to take artificial intelligence within the system of Torvine?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, it's a real risk, isn't it? Particularly, you know, the cyber threats and those sorts of things. What I can say is, you know, we run exercises and what-if scenarios to understand that if something went down, you know, what steps would we take, how would we manage that scenario, and perhaps it's something that I can provide further information on and further assurance outside of the meeting. But also we do monitor, and as I touched upon earlier in terms of our service plans, we have performance measures around system availability and those sorts of things. It's obviously we've got a range of systems, so that's always a conversation with potential suppliers as part of that procurement process to get some assurance around system availability, their resilience and those sorts of things as well. So there's a number of things that we put in place to try and maintain our resilience, maintain system availability, but there is always that risk there, and we're very proactive in terms of trying to manage that risk, and then if the worst happened, understanding what we would do and what the processes are. In terms of artificial intelligence, we are at the moment using a solution called Microsoft Copilot for Office 365, which some members may be aware of. It's a co-pilot, it's not an autopilot, so it's a tool that helps officers with, you know, day-to-day type activity. So we've been able to use it to automate elements of like minute taking, so we don't have to have someone sat in all meetings taking minutes. It can provide recordings, transcriptions and those sorts of things. It can help with generating initial sort of draft reports and those sorts of things. It can summarise information. It can even coach you on your email, your tones and those sorts of things. So that's one of the AI solutions that we're actively exploring at the moment, and we've got a number of licenses already in use across the organisation. I think, as George touched upon earlier, the pace of change, particularly around artificial intelligence, is vast. So trying to keep maybe not one step ahead, but certainly hanging on to the coattails of developments is something that we're actively looking at. And there may be a new opportunity that we're not aware of now, next week, 2 weeks down the line, but what we're trying to put ourselves in a position of is that we're able to try things, and where it's of demonstrable benefit to our residents and the organisation, we will actively pursue those sorts of opportunities.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, after that, that is the final question at the minute. I would very much like to thank the officers, James, Linda and George, for your hard work over the last couple of hours, and eloquent, and Linda, I said Linda, answering so eloquently and efficiently over the last 2 hours, much appreciated. I don't know if you've got any summarising before I ask you to leave the meeting, please.
I need to thank members, thank yourself, Chair, really. It's been great to see the engagement and the interest in digital, and particularly that offer to support us moving forwards with things like reviewing queue messaging, promoting the app. It's been really great to see that level of interest, and yeah, really welcomed your questions, so thank you.
Chair, could I ask for an indulgence, please?
Sorry, Councillor Clarkson, just seen you.
Thank you very much. If I could just ask one more question before we all leave the meeting to consider our recommendations. Regarding the external survey that was carried out, there were a number of questions and points that were raised within that of areas that needed to be improved. We were wondering, and we spoke at our pre-meeting about whether or not that could be used as a baseline to answer those questions and points objectively at this stage, and then that could be used as a baseline for the annual sort of review and evaluation of how the improvement of services are going.
Sorry, Councillor, are you referring to the Audit Wales report, which was undertaken?
Yeah.
And again, we've already provided a response to that, which we can share with members of scrutiny. Absolutely, I think it's fair to say there are areas that we perhaps would challenge, and have had some robust conversations with Audit Wales around their interpretation of our digital offering within Torfaen, but absolutely agree elements of it can be used as a baseline. And as I say, we've provided a response which starts to indicate and outline how we're addressing some of the comments, some of the recommendations made. So again, happy to share that with members.
That would be great if you could share that with us so that we could just see the response to that report. That would be really useful. Thanks ever so much.
Okay, many thanks for that. And once again, thank you to James, Linda and George. And so all that remains me to do is invite you to leave the meeting, please. Thank you. Right. Members, can I please remind you that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and still being webcast. Can I refer you now to the scrutiny activity and invite you to offer your recommendations? So I'll now hand you over to Rebecca, who will formulate the recommendations with us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can just quickly remind members of the scrutiny activity for today. And it is in addressing the key question, to what extent are our digital services delivering an improved customer care performance? The Adult and Communities Owners Committee is invited to consider the report and review the information presented, determine whether planned digital service development activity is appropriate and identify any gaps, assess the extent to which digital exclusion activities are supporting residents to access digital services, and again identify gaps, and then make your recommendations to the Executive Member for Corporate Governance and Resources on areas for consideration on future delivery. So I can see some hands up already, Chair, so if you'd like to hand over to members, and I'll note down the recommendation.
I can't even see your hand.
Councillor David Thomas.
Okay, first up, Councillor Dave Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. But all it is I just had a message now from Lantown Community Primary School that the caretaker's gone off ill and they want me to go over and lock the school. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave the meeting. But I just wanted to see if there was anything you want to ask me before I left. The only recommendation I would have would be about the introduction of the shortening of the telephone message toll line.
I picked that one up. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas, and thanks for your input. I'll keep much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. Good luck, everyone.
Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to make the recommendation that we look at the potential of expanding my customer services offer that we currently have within libraries and the civic centre to our community hubs, possibly within the Connect Torvine sort of platform with those iPads, and to look at working in partnership so that we can work with other organisations and people can then visit community hubs and areas that are closer to their communities to report issues and to have assistance with contacting with our local authorities and other organisations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clarkson. We want to Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's a recommendation, more of observation. I'm a bit alarmed at, you know, how quick we can turn around the digital exclusion, particularly if some areas have got nothing. What I was looking at to see what response they could come back with regarding when they could sort of look into supplying some sort of, you know, support with it to get it up and running, or do they need to collaborate with someone? But that was at the part I was a bit thing with, because Linda brought up digital poverty, and I think that's one of the things we tend to overlook. So I don't know whether they make anything out of that, Beck, but
yeah, so Councillor Evans, what I've noted under a couple of the sections, James often mentioned about greater collaboration and more coordination working with community groups, because apparently he mentioned there are a lot of organisations that are already conducting a lot of this work. But they do agree that there is more coordination that needs to take place. So I've noted that down under a couple of points. So perhaps if I merge that into one sort of recommendation about and include within that the digital exclusion that you're referencing there, and the coordination of services and community activity in achieving greater digital inclusion.
Great, thanks. And like I said, with the forms, we did discuss that, and you know, can we have an update of what they're looking at, and as the 300 forms be reduced or duplicated, or we need to have some feedback regarding, you know, when they're looking at it and what the outcome is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Linda Clarkson.
Sorry, sticky buttons again. Beck, you may have already picked this one up regarding providing us with the response they've given to the All Wales audit, the external audit that was done, and to use some of the questions within that as a baseline going forward, so that we've got an evaluation sort of tool to actually use.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clarkson. I've noted that one down to pop on the action sheet to make sure that you get sent the response to that Audit Wales one, but I'll also note it in the comments of the recommendations about using that, like you said, as the baseline.
Thank you.
Councillor Steve Evans, got your hand up.
The other point I'm trying to raise is, no matter what we do digitally, not everybody is going to respond to it. No matter what we try and improve, whether we try and do the app, we still have to have a route that's not digital, because, as you're aware, probably in your communities, some of the elderly will not, and I repeat, not do anything digitally. So, you know, and some of it, they're not recording anybody walking in or anything like that. And now that's a concern, because we haven't really got some sort of figures that who's coming in and how it's being dealt with data-wise.
On that point, Councillor Evans, earlier on, when James was talking, he did specifically say it is not digital only. It is not the only platform, so it will never be, or as far as we're aware, it will never be digital only. We will still have other ways and means of communication.
Yeah, but Linda, the officer, did say that they haven't been recording any data up till now of any individuals coming in regarding any of the issues they've got. So that's why I asked that, because she actually stated that.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I've noted that one down. So if I just quickly run through the other points that you raised during the course of discussions. So there was the one Councillor Thomas has just re-raised about the review and the introduction segment of the calls. That was under the customer care performance section. Under the development activity section, there was about more communication on the app and more presence out there in the community. Part of that, Chair, you mentioned about councillors being involved with that as well, and they did make an offer of a seminar or training session for members to be able to promote that app and so that you have a greater understanding of using it.
Therefore, on that situation with the app, could we get a seminar related to the app, please?
On digital inclusion, again, there was one referencing back to Councillor Evans and partly Councillor Clarkson's points about a community's approach and more coordination between those. And then there was also the recommendation from Councillor Haller with regards to blind, partially sighted and other accessibility organisations working in partnership with those to develop suitable provision. Face-to-face conversation, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clarkson, got your hand up?
Yes, please, if I could. I'd also like to make it a recommendation, the point I raised, because it was asked, but it wasn't fully answered, that we use the information we gather on data connectivity in reverse to identify the people who have not got internet connection or maybe the mobile black spots, so that we can look at more specific ways of targeting them. I think that'll answer Councillor Evans's point on we will always have a section of the community who will want to contact us in another way other than digital. If we can use the information we garner about the digital connectivity and how people are actually, we should be able to identify, and there is something in the report about we should be able to identify households that haven't got internet connection, and maybe we can target those households more appropriately with other forms, mail drop, whether that's mail drops or text messaging or whatever, to make sure that we are being as digitally inclusive as we possibly can and not digital first. But you know what I mean, Beck, you've got it, haven't you?
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah, I've got that down. Just to
Thanks.
add on to those recommendations, there's a couple of action points on the action sheets, if I just remind you of those. So there's the response to the Audit Wales report that Councillor Clarkson referenced. There is, James offered to provide further information on the use of the Alloy system and information on that. Then there was also the offer of sharing the survey with members, the post-interaction survey, so that members had a better idea of the questions and the information that is sought from those and what they then work with to develop their services. That was it for action points.
Councillor Haller?
We talked about the resilience of the network. Didn't really come over on a clear picture of what was going on, so could we ask for some more information on that? If the network goes down completely, then as an organisation we're not in a very good position. Is there a question to ask about that?
Yeah, they say they're going to, James did say he'd share some of that with us, so that could be another action point, couldn't it?
Yeah, I'll put that on the action sheet rather than that form of recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. can't see no other hands up at the moment, so obviously we can condense all these recommendations and Beck will sort that out and get it out to us. Right, agenda item 6. Consideration of item for next meeting. Rebecca, can you please remind members of what that was?
Thank you, Chair. So if I can just quickly run you through the appendix to this agenda item. You will see you have the basket of items that you selected at Vision In. Now, against the next date, which is the 16th of January 2025, you selected Safer Torvine Community Safety Partnership. And the key question with that is looking at what impact the CSP is having on community safety in Torvine since its re-establishment. With regards to other feeders, within the Exec Forward Plan, there were no upcoming decisions within the remit of this committee within the time period. Obviously, you only had a meeting 2 weeks ago, so it's been a fairly short reporting period. And also, there's been no audit committee referrals in that time period relevant for this committee as well. So can I confirm our members still happy to take the Safer Torvine Community Safety Partnership report at the next meeting?
Yeah.
Happy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 7, date of next meeting. The next meeting will be on Thursday, the 16th of January 2025 at 10 a.m. Obviously, I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and your contribution today. But before we shoot off, I know Beck needs to do a little survey.